Hey there, welcome to a new video. My name is Basti and today I want to show you how I master my dubstep tracks. Before we get started, make sure to drop a like, subscribe and leave a comment, which are the best ways to support the channel. Alright, let's get right into it. When I'm producing my tracks, I always make sure that I have no sound changing effects on the master, like a clipper, a stereo processor and so on. So I'm always able to hear the direct output of the sounds I'm currently working on. Let's listen to this drop example and then I can show what I do on my mastering chain. That's the song I made during the last Basti Battle event. You can see that we were clipping the entire time on the output next to my camera on the bottom right. And that's not bad in dubstep. Last year I had a different approach though. So I was always trying to make the output of each individual track as clean as possible, which means I always threw a clipper on a group or on a sound. So I made sure the individual layers weren't clipping. But later on, since May last year, I changed the approach and completely got rid of clipping anything on my buses, only for sound purposes. Like I would clip a sound to get a cool distortion effect, but not to clip it in a technical way, if you know what I mean. I would only use it to make something sound different because clipping is just distortion. And for my new approach, which I'm running since last year, I'm only throwing a clipper on the master. Besides that, in my opinion, it's also extremely important to make the mixdown as good and as clean as possible before the master. So some people would throw a multi-band compressor on the master. I'm not a big fan of that. You may have seen me throwing a spec comp on the master during the feedback streams, but I would not recommend it because in the feedback streams, I don't have the stems to polish certain areas in some of the sounds. And that's why I'm just throwing the spec comp on the master, because that's the only way I can do something in the feedback streams to maybe help someone improving their track. But in general, when you work on your own personal project, always make sure to make the mix sound as clean as possible. Mastering is overrated. You don't need 10,000 mastering plugins. In my opinion, you don't need any mastering plugins which are out there in mass. So always make sure to make the product which goes into the master as good and as clean as possible. And I also always make it as loud as possible. So I never crank up the drive on the master. Of course, some people do that, but in my opinion, it sounds cleaner when I don't drive everything into the clipper on my master. The first plugin I have on my master is a utility, and the utility is just automating the width. So towards the end of the build-up, I'm automating down the width to around 70%, sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher, depending on what kind of sounds I have going on in the build-up, just decreasing it to 70% so the drop impact hits louder. After that, I have an EQ to just check what the frequencies are looking like. Let's have a look. Looks really good, really clean already. And after that, I throw on 3 plugins, which always work for me. So I, most of the time, always have the same mastering processing chain. Sometimes I tweak the settings a little bit, especially on the plugin I'm throwing on the first now, the M stereo processor, but most of the time it's just these settings. And with the M stereo processor, I just want to make sure that the bass is mono, the low mids are a little bit wider, the high mids are also a little bit wider, and the high end is the widest compared to the original signal. So now let's have a comparison of what it sounds like with the M stereo processor and without. And I will also activate the mini meters so we can see what's going on in the stereo image. So without, it sounds like this now. Now with the M stereo processor, you can see that we are fixing the sub bass basically. Without, we had this curved sub bass line which came because of the bias processing I did on the sub bass. But with the M stereo, I'm just making sure the sub bass is mono. Of course, in the EQ, you can see that there's some stereo information going on in the low end, but this comes from the low mids, which are basically blending in this region. All the sub bass frequencies are mono, which is the point here. You can also hear that everything besides the low end feels a bit less prominent without the M stereo processor. So the M stereo processor basically also helps me to make the high end in particular louder, because when we make something wider, it's being perceived louder, which is nice. Of course, I did lots of stereo processing on the individual sounds before, but it feels and sounds nice to have some global stereo processing going on. Also make sure when you use M stereo processor to activate the linear phase mode, which is really, really important. After the M stereo processor, I'm using the newfangled saturator, which I'm using on the default settings, I think. So I'm not using hard clipping, I'm soft clipping here, and also no drive, as I said earlier. So I'm basically cutting off the ceiling. And you can see that everything is being cut at 0 decibels. The yellow area was basically the sounds which were louder than 0 decibels. And this technique helps me to crunch all the elements together. So we are cutting off all the spikes with the clipper here, and this helps me to get a really sharp and tight master. Let's have a comparison again, without, and now with. So you can hear that all the elements now feel right in place, which is awesome. Finally, after this clipping process, I'm using the Pro L2 to just give it some more aggressiveness. And for doing this, I'm also using the aggressive style preset down here. Also feel free to copy the settings I have here. These settings were just sounding the best to me. And it's not a big difference, so this step is optional. But for me, it sounds a little bit better. It sounds a bit more polished. And now let's have a listen again. For me, it's not a big difference, but it sounds slightly different, and I like how it is processing the already clipped sound. Without, and now with. It's not doing a lot though. For me, it just sounds 1% better, and that's why I'm using it. What I can also recommend to you is getting the stereo tool, which is a free plugin, so you can see how the stereo image is behaving. This is like the perfect stereo image for me. We have a strong center. We have extremely wide sides, which is perfect for this genre. Everything else is perfectly distributed. We are using all the space we have, and that's what I'm always planning to achieve. In general, I can also recommend to do referencing. So listen to the tunes from your favorite artists and see how their final tracks are sounding like, and try to get the mix sound as good as possible, and then do the final shaving on the master with basically just a clipper. And if you like, some stereo processing, depending on what you make and depending on how it fits your workflow, how it fits your style, and so on. For me, it works perfectly how I'm doing this. I really like applying this mastering chain to basically all my tunes. But of course, there's no right or wrong. If you have different approaches which work out for you, just go with them. I don't want to tell that there's only one mastering method. That's my method, which I wanted to share. Many people have requested that. And now I made the video. So let me know what you think of my mastering approach. And I also dropped a new tune on SoundCloud, which is something completely different from what I usually do. So it's not dubstep. So maybe some of you will enjoy it. I would really appreciate it if you check out the tune. I will link it in the description and in the fields appearing on the screen right now. And that's it for today's video. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe if you're new here. And see you in the next one. Have a great day and goodbye.